We want to extend a warm welcome to Anthony Hudson, our guest today in the studio. Anthony, you are running for governor as a Republican from Grand Blanc, from mid-Michigan, and we want to take this opportunity to hear more about you. You're not the traditional politician that is a household name necessarily, but we want to give you this opportunity to tell folks more about you and your background and why you're in this race.
Okay, yeah, my name is Anthony Hudson. Originally from Texas. I moved to Michigan about 13 years ago to be a father to my children. And I've lived and seen what happens in our state based on our representation that we have out of Lansing. And you hear people talk, average people talk all the time about what's bothering them, what their concerns are, and what they want to see from their servants in Lansing. And I decided last year that I wanted to stand up and do something about it. So I ran for U.S. Congress in the 8th District, did not win the primary there, but we learned a lot. And we had a huge response after that primary for me to step up and continue, not to just kind of disappear in the shadows, but to continue to fight for the every average day American Michigander that lives here. So we jumped into the governor's race. We did it relatively early, and here we are. You know, we've gained some momentum. We've got over 2 million hits on social media in just the last 28, 30 days. So that tells us that our messaging is good and people are interested.
What is your platform in terms of jobs, economy, things like that? You know, what are your goals?
Well, one, our government is too big in Lansing, in the state of Michigan. It's huge, and that means you and I have to pay for that. We feel like our money is being wastefully spent on agendas that don't work for the Michigan people. We have a governor that's not present in our state most of the time. She was overseas in Europe recently. We had a late declaration of emergency, state of emergency, with what's going on up north. And I feel that our leaders or our representation needs to stay in the state of Michigan to represent the people, especially in our time of need.
What would you do to bring jobs and business to Michigan?
Well, one, we started supporting Carla Wagner and Axe My Tax to eliminate property taxes in the state of Michigan. Give people full ownership of their homes and their businesses. And when you can do that, you're enticing major manufacturers to come to Michigan to turn a profit instead of pay a property tax. When you bring the jobs, people will come back to Michigan because there's no property tax. We also feel that the state income tax should be exhausted as well. I personally feel I don't have to pay the state for the right to go to work. There's better use of the money in my house than it is when it gets in the hands of Lansing or our government. So we want to eliminate the property tax, the state income tax, and we want people to keep their money so that they can afford to survive and live in this state. It's a beautiful state, and we have so much to offer here, but we can't afford to do it because our taxes are way too high.
Let's talk about the roads and infrastructure. You've spent many years driving a truck, and so you've seen those roads up close. What more do you want to do, or what do you want to do differently?
I want to take the money and actually allocate it towards the roads. We have an MDOT that's worth $8.1 billion to our budget. And I don't see the roads getting repaired. I see cones everywhere, but I don't see the roads getting repaired. And driving a truck, I feel every bump or scratch in the road all day long, and it's ridiculous. We have found a way that we could actually take the $8.1 billion from MDOT, disperse it to the counties, let the county road commissions do their job, let them have the funding, and then use a bidding system with the contractors within the state, which will put aggressive bids to be paid to fix our roads rather than rely on MDOT.
How about public safety? You know, that's something that every community thinks about, you know, being safe, making sure there's adequate resources for police and fire. Where do you fall on that?
100% in support of our our lawmen, our police officers, our fire, first responders, our veterans. I grew up with two uncles that were cops for 31 years. My father was a chief of police for a few years in Texas. So there's a lot of passion for our law enforcement. We have to have the resources, we have to have the funding, we have to have the ability for them to do their job. But none of that means anything if we don't have law and order. If we're not willing to go after and seek justice for those who commit crimes, then it's pointless. So we need to get back to law and order in Michigan.
The president has talked about restructuring in terms of education, the Department of Ed. Where do you fall on education? Do you agree with his position?
I believe the position is correct. I believe that the states ought to have control of their education, because right now what we're doing in Michigan is not working. We're spending a lot of money on education with low results. I mean, we're one of the worst in the country as far as education, and our budget is asking for a 17% increase when we had a 15% decrease in students. So the funding continues to go up, but the production continues to lack. So we need to get control of education here in the state and make sure that we get back to a traditional education, not today's indoctrination. And we fully believe that having that on a state level will be better suited for our children and their future.
You have a view on women's rights you want to share. You know, in our state, voters made it part of our state law that women have access to abortion. What do you feel about that?
You know, I feel like there should be full transparency and medical consent when it comes to these things. I am a pro-life supporter. I don't believe in late-term abortions, but I do believe that there are a couple exceptions that should alter a conversation between a expected mother and their doctor. Doesn't mean that they're going to go that route, but at least have options available if you were violated or something bad was supposed to or happened to you. You should at least be able to have a conversation with your medical professional to discuss where you're at and what your choices are.
I want to ask you about one other thing. You know, your name being new to politics, and I know you talked about why you wanted to enter into the race. You know, you've got names like Mayor Duggan, Sheriff Chris Swanson, Jocelyn Benson, Secretary of State. How do you plan to compete against some of these names that have already had a lot of time to get their message out?
You know, I try not to focus on them so much because I got my own campaign to run. But when I look at the facts, and I look at Mayor Duggan running as an independent when he's a lifelong Democrat, and I look at the allegations of Jocelyn Benson with the voter interference recently, and I look at some issues that have happened with Chris Swanson, and you know, I'm not here to target them and attack them. I need to focus on me. I need to focus on our positivity and how we're going to unify the state through common sense practices and not politically sabotaging people's income and their paycheck.
In terms of unification, too, I want to ask you one other thing. You know, there's been a lot of talk about people not getting along in Lansing, just like as in Washington, Democrats, Republicans. How do you plan to work with both sides to get things accomplished?
Well, we have to have a level of aggression to go in. You know, a leader needs to go in and command the room and the respect of those that he's leading or working with, or she. And I feel like if we go in with practical common sense and we are allowed to bring compromise back to the table, not one way or the other, but true compromise, we can fully represent the people of Michigan. And I think that's where Michigan wants, I think that's what they want to see in Lansing, is someone that will go to bat on either side of the aisle, because the policies that we bring forward, they don't help just Republicans or independents or Democrats. They help all of us as a society within our communities. So that's what we want to focus on, good, solid policies that help everyone. And if we can lower the temperature, the political temperature, and start looking at each other as neighbors and friends and humans, then maybe we can get past the hatred and the bigotry that's going on right here in Michigan.
Anthony Hudson, thank you so much for taking time to
discuss
these important topics and visiting with us today, as we want to share all of this with our audience so that they can make the right decision for them at the polls. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.